Here we go. Welcome, 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 everybody, again um, to my new art history talk. Here we go. Perfect. And today we will be talking about artists who worked closely with Peter Paul Rubens. 2 weeks ago, we talked about Rubens in particular. And the three artists that we will be talking about today are Jacob Jordaens, Franz Snyders, and Anthony Van Dyck or Van Dyke. There are two ways of pronouncing his last name. And um, sometimes you might hear art historians or local guides describe these three artists as Rubens' students, which isn't 100% accurate. And the reason why it is confusing is that Rubens had a workshop, and all of these three artists worked together with Rubens. They worked for Rubens in his workshop, but you cannot consider Peter Paul Rubens's students, and here is why. Rubens himself was incredibly popular and successful in his day, and lots of very talented artists were hoping to become his students. In fact, we know a lot about Rubens and his life and opinions because Rubens's letters actually have been published and it's possible to read them. And from these letters, we find that he actually had to say no to a lot of people who wanted to be a part of his workshop, that wanted to be his apprentices and learn from him. But because Rubens was so incredibly successful and very special customers ordered artwork from him, he eventually realized that it was more efficient and more profitable for him to hire people who already were skilled artists to work for him, as opposed to hiring unskilled but maybe talented students. And so all of these three artists, they worked with and for Rubens in his workshop, but none of them were actually his students. In fact, by the time the third one, Anthony Van Dyck, decided to work for Rubens, he already had his own workshop already. He was a young prodigy, this guy. We'll talk about him in a little bit. So interestingly enough, when it comes to attributing some of the work that officially is signed by Peter Paul Rubens, art historians argue a fair amount as to how much did Rubens actually do and how much other artists contributed, especially these three. Because oftentimes when customers signed contracts with Rubens's workshops and wanted a final product to be made entirely by Rubens, and then they would hear rumors that maybe Rubens only did like a final touch up on them. They often complained and said, "I'm sorry, but this is not what we agreed on." And then Rubens would just say, "Pardon me, does this painting really look like something Jordaens would be able to do? Come on, would Snyders be able to paint like this?" And so he often denied when people said that maybe he didn't do a lot of it. So in a lot of these paintings that officially are created by Rubens, sometimes these three artists, contributed a lot to that. And in some of them, it's officially known which part of the paintings they did. You will, after today's talk, you will find out that each of them was skilled in a particular genre. And when you hear that some artwork was created by Rubens's workshop, you will probably be able to tell, oh, I think the beautiful fruit on the table were probably created by Snyder's, and so on. I'm not going to elaborate anymore because I want to move on to talking about these artists in particular. And you will notice today that we will be walking around the Hermitage a lot, because in the Hermitage we have a wonderful collection of all of these three artists. And as you know from my previous tours, the views of that museum are just so stunning and they're such good quality that I had to, I absolutely had to take you there. So without further ado, let me actually start with a painting by Jacob Jordan's that is not from Hermitage. This wonderful work of art by Jacob Jordan's is called Allegory of Fertility. You can see the name, the dates, the museum here on your screen, and I'm going to now zoom in to show you this painting in detail. You know, when we talk about fertility in this painting, Jordan's placed lots of symbols of fertility here. For example, we can see an abundance of fruit right here, and just really surrounding the people in the painting. The fruit is falling off the trees, and the woman in the middle is considered to be sort of the main allegory of fertility here. And I don't know whether you thought of that when I showed you this painting or not, but I remember the first time I saw this work of art, I thought, what an interesting way to depict a woman, to depict the goddess of fertility. First of all, she's not really looking at us. That's not very normal. Second of all, you know, we sort of see her rear end front and center here in the painting, which I find also quite interesting. And you know, when we even compare this beauty with the works that we would see in Rubens's art or in Dutch art from my previous tours, you know, when you look at this woman, you don't really think of like the ideal of beauty. You know, this is not your typical Venus that you would be thinking of. And really, this depiction of a woman is a very good illustration of what Jordan's art was like. This is sort of like female beauty of the people, a female beauty of the lower class, you might say. And this is actually a pretty accurate description of a lot of Jordan's artworks. To give you more of a context on the kind of like behind Jordan's works, I want to get back to history a little bit. You might remember from my previous tours of Holland and Flanders that this territory, formerly known as the Netherlands, was under the Spanish rule. And then right before Dutch art had its incredible rise, there was a revolution, and Holland separated from the Spanish rule. That's why they had such a rise of the middle class, and the customer really changed. Well, it did not happen in Flanders, and you can really see how that showed in art. For example, in this painting, it's not created for middle-class customers. It's more of a depiction of how simple people, and I'm going to put that in air quotes, would view fertility. Let me show you another wonderful example from the Hermitage Museum. This is one of my favorite paintings at the Hermitage. I always absolutely loved showing it to my guests. Some of you might have seen it with me before. It's called The Bean King. And I think the Bean King also is just like a wonderful illustration of how being under the Spanish rule affected Flemish art. A little bit of a background story. You can see it more like front and center on your screens right now. In Flanders, there was a tradition to celebrate the holiday of the Three Magi, and people would get together and have a feast. And the main part of the feast was creating a special kind of bread where there was a bean baked into it. Then the people shared the big loaf of bread between each other, and the person who got the bean in their piece of bread became the Bean King. Oftentimes, the Bean King would be crowned and celebrated. Sometimes the Bean King also chose a Bean Queen. And one of the things that later followed is that whenever the Bean King drank, everybody else had to drink too. So as you can imagine, this Bean King tradition was really loud and rowdy and a lot of fun. And again, this is not, something that would appeal to Dutch burgers, right? No, this is more like something that would appear to every regular person in Flanders at that time. This is a reference that everybody would get, and a very happy reference. But Jordaens adds even more fun details to the painting, right? Yes, we see the Bean King sort of front and center in the middle of the painting, but it's not just the Bean King that's having fun. Everybody in the painting is having fun. The guy towards the left, a little bit in the shade, is singing. The woman and the man at the very left, yes, they are toasting. And actually, Jordaens created several versions of the painting, and some of them are called The King Drinks, because this is what people shout when the king drinks. So they are toasting, the king drinks, while, you can see the man is touching her as well in quite an inappropriate way. There is a little kid in the bottom of the painting enjoying some tasty food, and a baby on the right. It's hard to see, but the baby is peeing on the dog in the bottom of the painting. There is a guy smoking on the right. So there's a lot going on. But the thing is, this is not just an ordinary depiction of any celebration that you would see. This is actually a quiet act of protest. As I mentioned earlier, Flanders was under the Spanish rule, and at some point, because they were afraid of riots, there was a rule that forbade the Flemish people to gather in big groups. So big celebrations like the one of the Bean King would be officially forbidden. And by painting this, Jacob Jordaens sort of, says to the Spanish rule that you can say we can't get together in big group, but you cannot really control us fully. You cannot really stop me from depicting that in my painting. So this is a quiet act of protest in a way. So if we're talking about the genre of this painting, then I would say this is a genre scene. And we will be comparing a little bit with Dutch art of this time. So again, this is quite a rowdy scene, but let me show you a rowdy scene from Dutch art, very different, you know. You only see a couple people. Yes, they've been drinking, but there is nothing too indecent going on. Yeah, they're just drinking and smoking. Yes, it's something that decent Dutch citizens shouldn't do. But in general, the mood of this painting is much more toned down. And I think this is a great way to show the difference in art between Holland, that was developing more rapidly. More people were buying art for their homes, and Flanders, where it was more than just a genre scene for the artists, at least for some of the greatest ones, like Jordan's. So oftentimes you can see in Rubens's paintings, Jordan's would do some of the touch-ups on the portraits of people, or on the interior of the portrait, and so on. And when it comes to portrait, another wonderful artist that was a part of Rubens's workshop was Anthony van Dyck. And as I mentioned earlier, Van Dyck, he was a young prodigy. He was very young when he became noticed, and art, you know, he got his first customers, and very quickly it became clear that Van Dyck is very skilled in portraits, and it was noticed by the Spanish crown. And Van Dyck was younger than Rubens, and Rubens was busy sometimes. At the time when Van Dyck became popular, Rubens was dealing with the death of his first wife. So Van Dyck got noticed by the Spanish crown, and they commissioned portraits from him. But very soon, he also was discovered by the British royal court. And Van Dyck ended up spending years and years in England and creating portraits for the royal court and for the nobility of England. He was in the court of Charles I, and I wanted to show you this very interesting looking painting. It's not something you would see every day. This is a portrait of the monarch, but from 3 different angles. You can this can be explained by the purpose of the painting. The court artist didn't just create this to be hung on the wall. This was also a manual for the court sculptor. Charles I himself couldn't sit for the sculptor, and so they created this painting so that the sculptor could look at it and create a sculptural portrait of the monarch. But as I said, Van Dyck did not just create portraits of the royal family. He also worked for the British nobility and created these wonderful portraits. This is my favorite one in the Hermitage. These portraits just had this wonderful quality of showcasing the person in the best possible way, and really highlighting not just the parts of their looks that could be appealing to the viewer, but also in a very subtle way showing their personality traits. So as you can see, this painting is called Portrait of Henry Danvers, Earl of Denbigh. And in this painting, the model is not just a member of the nobility, but also is somebody who has seen battle, who has fought, and you can see traces of battle on his face. You also can see that he has earned certain awards, and you can see him wearing different military medals and such on his chest. And finally, with his hand there, he is holding a dagger, which was given to him to honor his bravery. And that also is emphasized by the mere angle and the mere gesture that Van Dyck chooses for the portrait. It was sort of like his signature angle. He was one of the very first artists who started not just placing models looking straight ahead at the viewer, but slightly turning. And this is one of the most beneficial angles for the model. Plus, just moving the hand like that slightly also is a gesture that shows movement, and he is holding the dagger with his hand as if to say that if um, the motherland needs protection, he is always ready. He has the dagger there. His right hand is placed on the table next to a symbol of royalty, also symbolizing his royalty to the crown, which is also very important. I'm going to close this and zoom in a little bit on the painting itself, because I also think that Van Dyck achieves a wonderful balance of showing the beautiful materials in the painting, because of course not everybody could afford this sort of clothes. It's uh, it's also a sign of a high status for the owner of such a portrait, but yet it's not the mere focus of the painting. Yes, Van Dyck is wonderful when it comes to painting beautiful silk or velvet or lace, other things as well. But it does not take away from the face of the model, is what I find. You can see also a facial expression full of dignity here in the portrait. I love to compare, as I said, and I want to show you one of the portraits from Holland, from Holland's best portrait artist, probably. We talked about him as well, Frans Hals. Also very similar in the way that, yes, we see the focus of the painting be surrounded by beautiful clothes, luxury, and so on. A lot of personality being shown in the face. Yet this is a businessman. The gentleman in the portrait here was an owner of a brewery. It's not a member of the nobility. So this is toned down a little bit. This is about celebrating the model, but things like bravery and nobility are not at the forefront of this painting. I'm going to show you several more works by Van Dyck, and this one is not a portrait. It is a work on a religious subject, which is not that common for Van Dyck, but it is wonderful. It's known as Rest on the Way to Egypt, or also known as Madonna with Partridges. Back in the day, partridges were known as a symbol of sin, a symbol of frivolity, and so we can see that where Madonna with the family rested, the partridges are flying away. At the same time, she is surrounded by other symbols of godliness, such as, for example, sunflowers that are looking at the sky or at the sun, just as she is looking up to God. There is a parrot hiding in the tree that also is a symbol of her divinity. And finally, this is also just a very beautiful genre scene. Why do you see all these babies here? Well, they are trying to entertain baby Jesus, who she's holding in her arms. And I think that this is a wonderful detail, that I think that this is a wonderful depiction of a mother with her baby. Look at this. She's holding the baby in her arms. To me personally, it looks like she's maybe just a little bit tired of the baby being restless in her arms. And the baby is just so incredibly amused by what's going on in front of his eyes. He's trying to run away from mom. He's trying to get out of her arms and join the fun. You can see the fun there. And the father is sort of in the back, not participating in what's going on. I find it just a little sweet genre scene in the middle of a religious painting. And that's another thing about Van Dyck that made him so successful, is he was also one of the very first artists who became good at depicting children. And so members of the nobility would also commission portraits of their kids from Van Dyck. And I will show you a couple wonderful examples here on the opposite wall. Look at this one, for example. Aren't these two girls just so lovely? And, you know, before Van Dyck, a lot of artists, the way that some artists would depict children was literally as miniature adults. They would not look like kids at all. And this really reflects the culture of that time, because when you look at even the clothes that the kids had to wear, you know, these look like adult clothes. Children were not always treated as kids. They sometimes were treated as miniature adults and had certain expectations, things that were expected of them. And I think that that philosophy, when it came to raising kids, it really showed in the art of that time. And Van Dyck was one of the very first people. Rubens had that also a little bit. He was one of the very first people who started changing that. And kids in his works actually look like kids. Yes, maybe they are not always playing, but there's certain playfulness in their look. Just a couple more. A family with their baby. This is maybe not the most successful depiction of a baby. In Van Dyck's experience, he puts a lot more emphasis on the faces of the parents and a little bit less on the baby, but still, you can see a round, vivid face. You can even see movement a little bit in this little baby, which also is again a little different from what you would see. You can sense the movement. You can sense that this baby is a little bit uncomfortable in his mother's arms. Finally, when it came to self-portraits, Van Dyck was also a very skilled portrait artist who depicted the model in a very flattering way. Here is Van Dyck's self-portrait. Again, the signature angle. You can see how the artist is standing, how he's looking at us, and his look is full of dignity. You can see truly a noble person in here, but at the same time, it's not just that. It's not just the status that shows in the painting. It is also the true nature of a philosopher that you can see here. This is the look that of a man who has been contemplating his life. You know, this is the look of a true romantic here, and that can be seen in his clothes, which you know, even for today's standards, it's simple, it's stylish, but it's made, you can see, of high quality, beautiful silk that he showcases here. And another interesting detail is that he really wants to move away from depicting himself as a craftsman, and artists would sometimes be viewed as craftsmen, really. And you know, the first thing that would give away that you are a craftsman is your hands. An artist's hands were not always very gentle and dainty. You know, you work so hard with your hands. You mix paint. Your hands are often dirty, and it was important for Van Dyck to not show himself in that way. And there is alleged that he hired a model separately for his hands here. Finally, again, there are small signals even in the background that show us this very thoughtful, philosophical nature of the artist. He is leaning on ancient ruins. There is, as you can see, there is a little bit of a column there. So a ruin is a symbol of this finite nature of life, right? When contrasted with a human life, an ancient ruin is something that stays there much longer than we do, and so it makes you, you know, contemplate the finite nature of your life. And this is what is going on here. So Van Dyck here is not just a successful man, that you might see that from the first glance at the painting. A man wearing stylish, expensive clothes, a man with hands of a true aristocrat. No, this is also a man who can feel and think deeply, strongly. A man who thinks not just about the mundane things in life, but some more eternal things as well. And I think that this portrait is absolutely wonderful. And so Van Dyck became sometimes sort of the quintessential artist, the trope, the meme of his time, so to say, because among the richest nobility, they said, you know, if your potential fiancé sends you a portrait of her painted by Van Dyck, you know, expect that reality will be very different from what you can see in the portrait, because again, he showcased these people in the best possible light. So often they found that the teeth maybe were not as nice as in the portrait, maybe the posture was not as nice. So they said, you know, when you get a portrait by Van Dyck, be careful. So we looked at works by Jordaens, who was skilled at creating beautiful genre scenes. We looked at Van Dyck, who again was the kind of artist who worked for the crown, who worked for the nobility, and became incredibly good at that. And finally, the last artist that I want to talk about today was known for incredible still lifes, and his name was Franz Snyders. So we're going to move on to the room of Franz Snyders. It's right next door in the Hermitage, and you can see this whole beautiful wall just covered by the gorgeous pieces. Again, let me quickly show you something to compare this with from Holland. One of the best possible still lifes by a Dutch artist. We talked about it in our tour called The Dutch Miracle. A still life that would hang again in the home of a thriving middle class citizen of Holland. when you think of a still life and its purpose in your home, you think that probably a still life could be would look very nice in the dining room, right? That's why often they would put beautiful food in a still life. This is something that can evoke your appetite, and this is something that creates the mood of pleasure, the mood of enjoying your life. And you can see that here in this still life by Heda. And um, even though the color palette of this painting is not really vast, there's a lot of grays, browns, whites here. This is a very subtle, very fine, intricate display of luxury. All the foods, well, most of the foods that you see in the painting are rare and not available to everybody, such as oysters or the spices in the center. Some of the dishes are made of the finest materials, such as glass, silver, and so on. And everything here really is supposed to evoke appetite as well, and evoke the desire for pleasure, so to say. And in a very subtle way, as you might remember, we talked about it, in a very subtle way, this also is a conversation about the divine nature, even with the diagonal lines that strive to go up towards the sky, towards God, even with the depiction of bread and wine, the depiction of oysters, which sometimes are considered a symbol of Virgin Mary. Very subtle, and you sort of choose how you want to view this painting and how you want to enjoy it. Do you just want to view it as something that evokes pleasure? Be my guest. Do you want to use it to contemplate about something maybe deeper, more important? You can find that in that painting. Again, very intricate. Now let me show you pieces by Snyder. What we have at the Hermitage is a whole series. You can see that on the wall. In the bottom, this is a series that is called Market Stalls. And each of the paintings in the series depicts a different market stall. You can see here a poultry stand. This is a fruit stand, a fish stand, and there's a vegetable stand. So different stalls. And I will zoom on some of them more than others, but let's start with the left. Let's talk about the poultry. You know, if you compare this with the still life by Heda that we just saw, you know, there's nothing subtle. There's nothing subtle about this piece. This is very much abundance thrown right in your face. You can see in this painting, you know, you can see large birds right there, and it's not just large birds, but there's a lot of them. You can see a lot of them in the same painting. At the same time, on top of the large birds that you can see a lot of movement. You know, when you look at this painting, you really see circular motion almost. So circular motion is also never-ending motion. Everything in this painting is moving. Everything in this painting is bursting with life. Let me show you the one right next to it as well. So this one too, this is again abundance thrown right in your face, especially to Snyder's contemporaries, who would be able to tell that the fruit that is depicted in the painting is the fruit that come, first of all, from different seasons. So it would be pretty much impossible to have them in the same market stall at the same time. But also, it's the fruit from different parts of the world. A lot of it very expensive imported fruit, which again, also you can imagine, again, there's abundance right in your face here. There's a lot of movement again. You can see a dog barking in the bottom of the painting. There's a, this rich woman in a beautiful dress. You can see beautiful white gloves on her hands, fancy color. She's trying on this probably very fragrant peach, and she's placed next to an older worker of the farm, the store, so that emphasizes her beautiful skin as well. So there's a lot of beauty going on here, a lot of movement as well. This one, the fish stall, again, there may be not there's maybe not as much movement as the one with the dogs, but still you again see this impression of circular movement, and again just sea creatures, all the possible sea creatures you can think of. Again, this is abundance thrown right in your face. Quite different from the subtle still lives by Hedda. And I also might say that this is about more than 5 times the size also. So again, this is created not for a middle-class citizen. This is created for extremely wealthy nobility. We have to remember again that we're living under Spanish rule here. But one thing that the series, the stalls, and the very elegant and subtle still lifes by Hedda and other Dutch artists have in common is these paintings, believe it or not, also could have a deeper meaning if you choose to interpret them this way. Again, you can choose to just enjoy the abundance of fruit, that evokes your appetite, or you can try to find a deeper meaning. And in order to do that, we are looking at symbols again. The dog in the bottom of the painting, a dog is a symbol of loyalty, a universal symbol of loyalty. However, if you see a dog barking angrily, you always interpret this the opposite way. An angry dog means disloyalty, indecent behavior as well. A monkey was also a symbol of vice, a symbol of indecent behavior. And you can see there's a monkey climbing the table, grabbing the fruit, everything is falling down. There's chaos. They did not like chaos back then. There's wasting of beautiful fruit, just going and stealing something that doesn't belong to you. There's a lot of that happening here. And even the woman talking to the shop worker also could be interpreted as an indecent proposal. Again, we're talking about 17th century art, and the contemporaries of these artists would be able to tell that right away. Oh, that could be an indecent proposal. She is fruit is being sold, so you could view this woman as one of the goods in the store as well. So just like you can have a painting that shows virtues and highlights them for us to follow, you can also have a painting that shows you the opposite. It shows you vices and warns you against following these vices. Or if you choose to view it for your own entertainment, it can be the other way around, right? Oh, not only do you get to enjoy the abundance of fruit in a fruit stall, but also look at all these vices also subtly being displayed here at the store. So here we have it. We've looked at paintings by 3 different Flemish artists, people who worked in different genre, and feel free to put your questions in the chat. I would love to answer while you are typing, to give you a couple minutes to do that. I also want to say for the next month's tour, I want to highlight that I will be attempting again for the last time to use YouTube live streams. I know we did that earlier, and for the very first tour of the year, it worked really well, but then we started having technical difficulties. And I would like to go back to YouTube streams because it just logistically makes things easier. The recordings are automatically saved. It's easier to share with other people. It's easier to comment and for other people to find us and join the stream. And the way that I want to make it logistically as smooth as possible, I will share the link to the stream in my Monday newsletter, the monthly newsletter. And also the day before the tour, when I send out the tour reminder, I will send the link to the stream and the link for the Zoom just in case, so that you will know to start with the live stream, but if things don't work in the first 5-10 minutes, to jump on the Zoom. And I will also share it in the comments. So we will have a plan B and everybody will know about it. However, hopefully plan A will work right away and the YouTube stream will work better. If that one time the YouTube stream doesn't work, then I'm not gonna attempt it anymore. Then we're just gonna stick to Zoom. So I just wanted to give you a heads up about it. I know it might be a little bit annoying, but I have a new tech setup, so hopefully it will work this time. And I do not see any questions in the chat right now. So I assume we don't have any questions. As I said earlier, I recorded this and I will do my best to share the recording as soon as possible, hopefully in the Monday newsletter. Thank you very much, everybody, again, for joining me today, as always, for listening to me talk about art. And I will see you next month when we talk about Russian icons.
Thank you.
Thank you.